Greetings, Earthlings. Hello, everybody. I think we're going to get started. Who here's heard of regenerative finance? Anybody? All right. Well, it's good. That's good. A few you have, and the rest of you I'm going to blow your minds, okay? So my name is Jeremy. I'm the head of fundraising with the Open Forest Protocol. I'm very honored to be up here telling you all about regenerative finance, playing Lorax, speaking for the trees. Regenerative finance is about more than just trees. So stick with me. We're going to go down the ReFi rabbit hole, and you'll come out the other end getting a really good sense of how Web3 might just be the way to save the planet here. So we're going to cover what is regenerative finance, why do we need it, what's happening in the space, progress to date, which has been pretty impressive in a very short period of time. And then we're going to dive into a project that's near and dear to my heart, that is the Open Forest Protocol. So personally, I've been in climate my entire career, policy and finance, and all the things that I've worked over the last decade and a half to try to prevent are getting worse and accelerating at a faster pace. I'm not going to lie, guys, things are looking pretty dim. I'm not going to dwell on the depressing shit because, you know what, that's not where solutions are made. Let's figure out how do we solve this crisis. So as you can see from this graph, nation-state-led policy solutions for climate seem to be highly effective at doing nothing. So why all the agreements and no action? Particularly when 1 in 4 Americans now are affected by a climate crisis every single year. I live in Boulder myself. Many of my friends lost their homes to a wildfire in December. That shouldn't happen. And we have climate refugees in my own town. Governments lack the incentive structure for global coordination that's required to solve a tragedy of the commons, the climate crisis. Nations exist really to have their own best interests in mind, which means putting themselves over others and over the commons. I think we need to stop looking for policy action. I mean, let's keep pushing on that angle, but I think the real solutions are going to come from a decentralized base. Now, if only there were a scalable solution, one that was designed with incentive alignment, and one that empowers the individual to act in a way that removes gatekeeping governments, regulatory bodies, and old white men from the equation. I'm a middle-aged white man, by the way. Regenerative finance is the answer. So let's go a little bit deeper. What is regenerative finance? I've devised a very simple sniff test so that when you're looking at a project in the Web3 space, you can tell if it's ReFi. And really goes back to first principles of currency as a tool for mass cooperation. Cooperation for what is the question? If the answer is we're using Web3 tooling to align incentives for positive social, environmental, or climate impact, then I think we can pretty well call it ReFi. I also created a user manual for good ReFi. Good market-based solutions harness the human need for return. Call it a return on capital, call it an investment, call it greed, call it putting food on the table and feeding your children. Everyone's aligned on that. Good ReFi creates mechanisms to take that global and shared incentive structure and pull the judo move to align it for regeneration rather than for extraction. Our economy is based on extraction and negative externalities, which means that smokestack coming out of that power plant, spewing stuff into the air that makes us all a little sicker, makes our world a little bit worse, but no one's paying for that. ReFi can harness globally distributed value and direct it to solving problems at an unprecedented velocity and scale. It is the judo move, using greed, using that need for return, and making it for a positive ecological, social, or climate outcome. Let's talk a little bit about ReFi impact to date. We're early. We're real early. We're early overall in this entire space, and with regenerative finance, the first few projects launched last year. Regen Network, I think, kind of was the first one to the table, built on Cosmos. Great project. Any regens here? There we go. There's always a few guys around. Yeah, so that was kind of the OG of the space. And then we had Toucan and KlimaDAO launch this last year as well. And they've done some really incredible shit in about 6 months that they have been in existence. So to date, twice as much carbon last year was transacted on-chain than was transacted off-chain. There is I don't know if you guys know this, there's a global carbon market, a voluntary and a regulatory market. They're active, they're growing, we'll get into how they're growing, but we're seeing more action on-chain than off-chain already. 5% of all carbon credits have already been sucked into the Web3 carbon black holes that have been created. That's in 6 months of action. Imagine what we're going to be getting through next year and the year after and in a decade. This is beginning to have real-world impacts. Let's talk for a second about carbon markets. The Task Force for Scaling Voluntary Markets convened last year is predicting this is going to be a $50 billion market by 2030, a $500 billion market by 2050. I think they're undershooting. I think it's going to be bigger, and we're seeing some pretty good market signals to support that. So carbon black holes, right? Toucan and Klima, they sucked up all this carbon. They put it on chain for what? What does that do? To what end? Well, right now we've got 70% of global gross domestic product is flowing through companies that have made net zero goals. That's huge. So as those goals, so when a company makes a net zero goal, they're going to say by 2030, by 2040, we're going to be net zero. And when they do that, when they try to achieve those goals, they're going to hire a whole consulting team, and they're going to try to say, okay, how can we reduce emissions on our supply chain? How can we reduce emissions in our production of whatever we produce or bring to the world? And then ultimately, there's going to come a point where they have to offset the rest. That's where they go to the voluntary market and they purchase carbon offsets. Now, we have carbon black holes in action. So how do those two things interplay? It causes the prices for carbon to go up because now we've swept the floor of poor quality carbon offsets. Those now exist and are basically locked into carbon black holes on Web3. It causes emitters to purchase better offsets, and it causes them to look deeper into their emissions reductions before even going to the market in the first place. So it causes real-world emissions reductions, and it causes the purchase of higher quality offsets, and by supply and demand dynamics, it's increasing the price of carbon overall. So it's having real-world, beautiful effects. The current ReFi landscape is growing and changing by the minute. Literally every week, there seems to be a new project cropping up. If you're not familiar with this space, I would definitely recommend getting on Twitter, looking at hashtag REFI, and just kind of seeing what some of the thought leaders in the space are saying. Very interesting space to watch. This is like probably a tenth of the projects that are out there. So if I missed yours, sorry about that, but it's impossible to keep up. Collectively, we're flipping the script on extraction as the means of creating global value. So now I want to go into a case study of a project that's near and dear to my heart, the Open Forest Protocol. I'm the head of fundraising for this. So we're going to talk about this ReFi sniff test. How do we meld that need for doing something good, that regen and the degen part, the need to provide returns. Unless you have both of those things and you're meeting up in the middle of that Venn diagram, you do not have a sustainable, long-term, successful project. So we have all those bases covered. Let's dive into it. So, Open Forest Protocol, you can imagine that we are forest-focused. The problem we're trying to solve really more broadly, though, is that ensuring markets have better transparency of data and efficiency of capital flow. In other words, we can provide very good on-chain transparent proof that trees exist and are absorbing carbon, and then flow capital from the carbon market right down to that individual actor level very efficiently, essentially removing the middlemen from the equation. And with all of the savings there, we return better returns to the project operators, the people planting trees, and we take the rest and we make everyone rich. Humans have removed a land area roughly the size of the United States of forests from our planet. Annual deforestation is more like the size of Greece. Forests are a natural carbon sink when standing and a carbon source when they're removed and destroyed. This has to change. And it's a huge opportunity. And the benefits go far beyond carbon. So right now, the carbon market is mature, it's active, that's where we're focused. But forests provide a whole lot more. And these are other things that we can add value to and essentially pay people for. Other goods like biodiversity, watershed protection, healthy soils, micro, macro climatic trends, and then historical and spiritual homelands for human beings. We need forests. If they're gone, take me out. I don't want to be here. But forestation has a huge scaling problem. So we've got a big market, we've got growing price per carbon, should be a huge opportunity, but things scale really, really, really slow, mostly due to a process called MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification. It's the process of providing proof and transparency that projects financed through carbon markets are indeed real, that the trees have been planted, and that they aren't being cut down. Have you ever given to charity and thought, like, where the hell did that money go, right? That's the kind of transparency or lack thereof that I think stops more investment into good things happening. We have created a Web3 structure that solves this. So this is a side-by-side comparison of the legacy system for accrediting forest carbon versus how it works through Open Forest Protocol. A couple key points here. The legacy system is expensive, which means that it's exclusive. People can't afford to participate because of the high fixed upfront costs. It's slow. It waters down economics to the landholder. There's a waterfall, and the landholder themselves, they're the people at the bottom of the waterfall. First, you have to pay a broker, then a third-party accreditation body, then a project developer. It's expensive, it's slow, and the data stream isn't contiguous and doesn't lead to a very transparent data set, which ultimately lends credibility and trust throughout the entire market and allows offsetters, purchasers of offsets who are actually flowing capital into this market to begin with, it slows their ability to do so, right? Just like you and me giving to charity and wondering where the hell the money went, we need to make that very clear for large corporates as well as the Web3 space so people know where the money's going. How we work in a nutshell, a basic process is anyone, anywhere in the world, right? This is the decentralized, permissionless, democratized part of it. Anyone, anywhere in the world can download our app in a very Web 2 interface. If they can create a Facebook account, they can work with the Open Forest Protocol app. They're going to create an account. They're going to upload structured data points, which are nested under a utility NFT that represents their project and their ultimately their capital flow, their value stream from that project. They're uploading structured data points on their forest project. Once on chain, we need to prove that that data is in fact true. So we have a tokenomically incentivized team of forest project data auditors that review that data in an escalation game, really to ensure that only valid data is passed through and ultimately accredited and accounted for in a carbon sense. On-chain carbon credits are then minted. So we have a utility token, but we also are creating what we call an OCC, an open carbon credit. It is the world's first fully on-chain, blockchain native carbon credit, right? And the majority of those credits are returned back to that project operator once they've been minted. The rest are shared with the entire network. So everyone is yielding value in the form of a carbon-backed currency. So we actually take 8% of all the value we create and we share that with the network. So that's how we're creating value. We're facilitating massive participation from the majority of regenerative land projects which have been unable to or excluded from MRV, and we're decentralizing the middleman, the legacy system of certification, so we end up with far more carbon-based value to share with our network, and we align incentives with all actors. As carbon gets verified, the majority, again, goes to that project operator, but a portion goes to those data validators, our investors, our core community, the team, and anyone else who is holding utility token and supporting the growth and operation of the network. And the numbers can get pretty darn fabulous, right? So this is a bit of a example of if we get a land area, our KPI at Open Forest is total hectares locked, which means how many hectares are we actually providing measuring, monitoring, reporting, and verification services for. And that is additive, right? Like once you're on, it's very sticky. You stay on and you actually upload data every single year. So an area the size of Hong Kong, if you had 100,000 utility tokens, you would passively yield $25,000 worth of carbon into your digital wallet. An area the size of Israel, 100,000 utility tokens, you would do over $100,000 worth of passive carbon yield into your wallet. The size of Greece, now you're talking $600,000 worth of carbon passively yielded into your wallet. And what do you do with that carbon? A, you can burn it as your personal or corporate offset. B, you can hold it because like me, you know where carbon market value is going. It's only going up. Or C, you can liquidate it, sell it, trade it for any other currency that you like, or off-ripen into fiat. So, so getting in early with Open Forest is potentially quite lucrative. And the way that we like to think about this, it's a blue chip or more of a bond-style crypto asset, because we all know how volatile this space is, and a lot of that volatility is based on social dynamics and hype cycles, right? Bull, bear market, whatever we're in, prices are going up, prices are going down. The value that comes to ReFi, and particularly through Open Forest protocol, is based on things that have nothing to do with the crypto space. It's simply people planting trees and providing proof that they're planting trees and stewarding those trees to maturity. Those people are pretty insulated from crypto hype cycles. And so as people keep putting more value on chain through more proof of their trees, the value continues to accrue, and that is largely unaffected by what's happening in the larger bull and bear markets. We plan to launch in May with mainnet. We've got a growing ecosystem. We're partnering with individual nations, with project developers, with individuals who hold land. So it's a top-down, nation-led approach, as well as a decentralized, bottom-up approach. And ultimately, we plan to eat a lot of the world and regenerate a lot of the world and put a lot of value on chain over time. As the ReFi space grows, DAOs can start to invest in land projects, fractionalize the NFTs that represent those value streams, share the value. We can off-ramp sell our credits to Toucan, to Klima, to Flow Carbon. There's a ton of coordination to happen in this space, so we're early. We're just seeing that start to happen. So let's talk ReFi. If anyone has questions, we can try. You can scream them at me here. Otherwise, I'll be around. Again, my name is Jeremy. Got our white paper and then a whole bunch of contact info for me with QR code. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.